Hi there, my name is Dave Herring, and I'm the host of the Edified Podcast by ChristianBook.com. I'm very excited to continue the mission to provide needful wisdom for busy pastors as they labor in the trenches of ministry. I've been in church leadership for over 25 years, and Christian Book has been essential to me in all of those years, so I'm especially grateful to be here. We have a number of great conversations lined up with a variety of guests to help us navigate topics and questions that are theological, relational, and practical in nature. The best pastoral advice that I've received that informs this podcast is be a student, not a critic. All of life is repentance, and edify, edify, edify. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you don't miss any episodes, and feel free to comment and tell others along the way. So thank you, and here's today's episode. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Sean Tucker to the Edified Podcast. He pastored for a decade in his homeland of South Africa, and then he became a photographer full-time and a filmmaker, and he's now based in the UK. He's been documenting and sharing his wisdom on YouTube for many years now, and he's got close to 600,000 subscribers. Maybe we can help push him over the edge to get there. But in addition to publishing photo books of his collections of his photography over the years, he wrote a book on his ministry journey called Unlearn, which I love that title, and I've really come fond of that book. And then in 2021, he wrote a very, very special book called The Meaning in the Making. So welcome to the podcast, Sean.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
When I started to get into photography in 2016, the internet and especially YouTube became my university. When I found your YouTube channel in 2017, I immediately felt like I had a spiritual soul brother on the other side of the pond. And I didn't know that you had a pastoral background at first, but your videos to me were sermonic kind of tutorials. And you could talk gear all day and technical details, and we all can as photographers. I can, pull all the cameras off the shelf and talk. But what you brought to the table was something deeper, and you really got to the heart of photography, and really were trying to get to the heart of photographers. And unusual thumbnails for your or titles for your videos: The War in Every Portrait, Getting Over Creative Block, You Need to Be You, Dealing with Creative Envy, Empathy in Portraits, Embrace Your Shadows, Balancing the Artist's Ego, The Importance of Retreat, and Getting Small and Telling the Truth. These are unique titles. This isn't your normal, Frono's Photo and, the Northrops kind of videos, although they can get into these kinds of things. But I just want to thank you so much for your unique voice.
Oh, you're very welcome. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
I was wondering if you could maybe give me an overview of your kind of journey, both in, getting yourself into ministry and then flowing that into your photography career.
The short version is I was born in the UK, but my family moved us over to Southern Africa when I was pretty young, so about 2 years old. But my parents got a divorce pretty quickly. I think I was 4 years old when they separated. And my mom moved us, my younger brother and I, who was only 6 months old, I was 4 at the time, back to the UK. But we were there about 3 years, and she really missed Africa. So she kind of just took us back as a single mom. And we lived in countries like, she eventually got remarried, Botswana, and then Lesotho, Swaziland, and South Africa. And as I was growing up, the loss of my dad being around really hit me hard. I was kind of a very rootless little kid after he left. My mom always says that my personality changed overnight, that I was a very bubbly, kind of gregarious kid. And after he walked out, overnight I became a very shy, retiring little boy. And I think that, even when my stepdad came along, I was quite excited that I was suddenly getting a dad. But he sat my brother and I down when he kind of married my mom, and my half sister was about to be born, and just made it very, very clear by literally saying this to us. Just to be clear, I'm not your father. I'm going to be Leah's father when she's born, but not yours. And I just remember that being, I mean, he wasn't an unkind man. I think he was just trying to, maybe from his side, he was almost going like, I don't want to pretend like I'm your dad suddenly. Do you know what I mean? Maybe there was a kind element to it, but in my head, it was an outright like rejection. I'm not your father. And so I was.
And how old were you when your parents got remarried, or your mom got remarried?
8 years old.
You were 8,
9. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was sent to boarding schools. From the age of 9, I just didn't live at home. I was at boarding schools all the time, and it did feel like I was being pushed out of this new family that was forming. And so I grew up very fast, and that's when I found the church. Really, I was sent the first boarding school I was sent to at 9 was a Roman Catholic boarding school in the UK, and I remember just connecting with this space, the chapel in particular, in the school, being a place which felt safe and comfortable for some reason. It was really just a feeling at the start. And then connecting to this idea and hearing about this God who was also Father when I didn't have one was a very, very attractive thing to me at the time. And I kind of became this, I think I was always spiritually leaning as a kid anyway, always looking for the more. But I think that's when I realized, like, I might be able to get a dad out of God if I work at this, you know. So yeah. And then I went on to high school, which was a Baptist-based high school in South Africa, and then did a gap year as part of a music and drama group, which was Christian-based as well. And that then took me into, you know, when I went to study at university, I did a psychology degree. But I already started working in youth ministry on the side. That was kind of more important to me at the time than the degree I was doing this youth ministry work. And then it was youth ministry for 3-4 years until I eventually got to go to seminary. And that kind of put me on this fast track to, you know, getting ordained. But I mean, we could jump into this if you want, but seminary for me was an undoing rather than a doing. I think a lot of people experience this going to seminary of like, you think you're going to go and they're going to give you your rock solid faith that's going to get you through ministry. But I think for a lot of us, it gives us questions that shatter our quite naive young faith. And we either then get to build a more mature, open faith on top of that, or what a lot of people do is just stick their fingers in their ears and go, I'm on this career path, I can't mess with this. And they just reinforce the young faith they built and won't hear questions about it. So for me, it kind of undid a lot of that. And so I think I knew that going into church work full time, I think I worked for 7 churches in total, that there were parts of the institution of the churches that I was certainly working for that I couldn't support from the pulpit. I couldn't do it. There were things I disagree with. And I was also a little firebrand in my 20s as well, and a little bit of an iconoclast. And so it was never going to work out. I was eventually fired from the last church I worked for saying things I was told not to say. And so, but that felt like the right time. And so I left, and that was about, I would just turned 30 at the time. And I had all these, like, I had this faith, which was still very important to me. It didn't slot in anywhere anymore. Like I wasn't really welcome in a lot of the churches that I knew, and I had more questions than ever, but I was more excited than ever to kind of, I mean, this will sound like complete heresy to most Christians, and I completely understand it, but I felt like to follow God honestly for myself, I had to leave. And I know, you know, that where 2 or 3 meet together and everything, I understand all that, but I knew if I had to, I was doing them damage by staying with the questions that I had, and I was hurting young Christians with an honest faith at the beginning of their journey. Those questions shouldn't be thrown at them, and I was a leader in the church, so I was doing them harm, and they were doing me harm because they were outright rejecting me and persecuting me for those questions, and it was best just to go my way for a while and pursue on my own. So I was kind of in this position where I'd sunk, 10 years into this career, and I'd gotten pretty good at it, and it got stripped away from me. So, I had to go back to waiting tables, and I waited tables 2 miles down the road from the last church I worked for, which meant that I went from standing on a stage on a Sunday, speaking to these people and having them listen to every word you say and you being a little bit of a hero, to I'm now serving them coffee and having to get out of their way so that I don't get involved in their conversation and everything else because I'm just serving them coffee now. It was a massive knock to the ego, but probably one that I really needed. And it was then when a friend said to me, well, you've got to start from the bottom anyway. So you might as well decide what you want to do now. And seeing as I'd love photography and filmmaking, I thought, I wonder if I could make that my job or my career. So I started working out how am I going to do this, and a little bit of freelancing, and it slowly led to first full-time jobs. And I moved back to the UK and bigger jobs. And then about 7 years ago now, 6 years ago, I finally managed to step off because I'd slowly started to build this YouTube channel on the side, and I could kind of work for myself and make that a career. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the short version, was it? I just realized.
No, that actually was a short version. I've heard the long version, so that's through your videos and through your books and stuff. So at least what I thought is the long version, but no, there's so much there to chew on. Were there any particular questions that kind of knocked you off your, not the sturdiness of certainty, but just kind of rattled the foundations for you?
Yeah, there were a lot. I think the headline of it was that I felt like I've been disillusioned by the structure of church, and particularly the power structure of church and what it kind of stood for, and how that was kind of the two things were separate. There was that sort of institutional church, and then there was my faith in God, and they were supposed to be the same thing. One was supposed to express the other, and vice versa. And yet, I felt like one didn't line up with the other at all. So, particular issues were things like in South Africa. Obviously, there's a lot of poverty, so a lot of the work I did was poverty outreach. And so we'd go out and do soup kitchens, and I would make these little films about what was going on to try and challenge young people to do something about it. And I would take my young people to go and work on the streets and help people get food and get ID books so they could get jobs. But then when we tried to bring those people to church, we were told not to because they might mess up the furniture. And they installed spikes outside the front door because they didn't want homeless people sheltering under the awning of the church in the rain. And I'm just like, what are we doing, guys? We're like, so because I started to stand up and call this out, obviously the church they couldn't put up with that, because now I'm a leader challenging the institution. And I can't remember where I heard it said, but strong institutions can take self-criticism, but we weren't a strong institution, so they couldn't. There was one particular incident in the last church I worked for where we had very serious xenophobic attacks in South Africa, which kick off every now and again, and it'll happen in 24 hours across the country. Some kind of signal goes out, and especially in the poorer communities, people will come out in the streets and they will attack businessmen who've come in from outside the country, from Angola or Somalia, and set up little businesses because they feel like they're taking work away from local people. And they will, burn shops and everything, but also pull people out into the streets and kill them publicly. So I'd said to the church, we need to do something about this right now. This is happening right now. Let's get buses in there and get people out, And they said, no, we can't do that because God's made us a steward of the bus and it might get damaged. So a couple of us stole the bus and we went in and we just took people out the whole day. And but the heartbreaking thing is we had to take them to local schools because we couldn't take them to the church because they wouldn't have them. And I'm like, I don't think we believe what we preach. I don't think we've read it. I don't think we've understood it. We think, but yet we'll have hours long arguments in committee about the color of the carpet that should be going in next week that we're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on. I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm like, I can't be a part of this. And I also knew, it's not like, I'm brilliant, they're evil. It wasn't that, because I knew I was right. Part of the problem, right? Because I'm there and they're paying me a salary to teach there every week. So I'm part of that big pool of money that's going into this instead of helping people who really, really need it. And I had to just take myself out of the equation completely and go, I can't really do this anymore. So, the other things were obviously I didn't understand where legalistic rules came before people and where that lined up with the Jesus they thought they were reading about. I couldn't get it. I couldn't line it all up. So for me, it was all those things. And I suppose the other big one was the fact that the intellect was often vilified, thinking for yourself. And this was probably why I was kind of targeted, because I think I was always a bit of a thinker and insisted on thinking things through for myself. And I felt like there was always this, and I heard this from people obviously as well, if you have faith, you shouldn't be asking these questions. You shouldn't be talking about all this stuff. You should believe. Like faith it's almost like to believe something, you shouldn't need to think it through. And I'm like, well, that's the perfect situation to lay up, to say, like, just believe everything we tell you. I think Freud said back in his day, he said the church trains its young people to only ask the questions it can answer.
Yeah.
And then it vilifies the intellect for the rest, right? So I felt like an intellectual dishonesty with my faith was me denying my intellect, which is also God-given. And that to me felt dishonest, and which is why, like, I couldn't be part of something that told me to stop thinking, just believe it, because that felt manipulative, And I know what they mean, and I know that some people do have that simple faith, and that's beautiful. I'm not questioning that, and you should keep it. But for somebody who's wired like me, that doesn't work. That feels like a lie, and I can't live like that. My faith has to line up with my intellect. It has to all fit together, because why would God give me these warring parts of myself that I couldn't integrate, So leaving the church for me felt like a bit of freedom, in that I could actually say, right, now I'm looking for you, but I'm looking for you with no holds barred, and I'm going to use every part of myself to find as much of you as I can in my lifetime. And that felt like a more honest pursuit, I suppose.
It reminds me of the Mark Knoll quote in his book, The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind. The first quote, or the first line, the scandal of the evangelical mind is that there's not much of an evangelical mind.
Yeah.
And as I hear your story, I'm like, wow, Sean's in really good company here. You sound like Luther. You sound like a bit like Augustine. You sound like Jesus in your criticisms of the church.
Yeah. I mean, that's the irony, isn't it? Yeah. When I used to have these conversations, and people would say to me, you need to be more Christ-like in how you're criticizing. And I'm like, if you read what he was like when he criticized, I mean, he had some choice words for religious leaders, and he also fashioned whips and drove people out. Like, if you want me to be more Christ-like, I don't think you know what you're asking. Like, I personally don't want to go that far, because I feel like it's too much. I'm just saying, can't we be a little bit more honest than we're being? And I think,
well, Sean, then you'd have to read the Bible first.
Well, yeah,
and actually
or
know your scriptures,
your favorite passages in your devotional, right? You can't pick and choose, yeah.
Right, yeah, and there's many things Jesus said are not going to show up on greeting cards, so or be hung on the wall. I think of Matthew 23, as well as Matthew 25. And I think that are you in your mid 40s right now?
Yes.
Yeah, same with me. And I think there's many of us in, if you want to call it our little micro generation, experienced a lot of the same disconnect with what we were hearing or being discipled in, and then what we were actually reading in the scriptures. And so it's a fascinating journey. And as you were saying, there's this, you want this harmony, right? You want this unity within the church, and you look to them you look to God's people as a safe place, right? In Bill Hybels' terms, a safe place to talk about dangerous ideas. And then there's these strands of fundamentalism that creep up and start to bop you on the head or slap you on the wrist. Yeah. And I had an early experience of that in my journey, and it had not to do with, noble issues like social justice and the like, but it had more to do with minutia of eschatology and what I believed about the end times. And I all but got ostracized from my church right after I graduated from Bible college, before I went to seminary. And it's weird. I had to sign a contract that said that I couldn't talk about Calvinism. I couldn't even explain the views theologically on different takes of different theological topics.
Wow. Yeah.
And it shook me to the core. It's just like, this is a church that I was nurtured in, that I came to faith in, and then all of a sudden, who am I? You know, I thought I was, going to not the right places, but places that were affirming
Yeah.
of my connection to you. And now I'm being kind of like cast away.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, fortunately, God's people didn't cast me away. It was just certain leaders within the church.
Yeah.
And it took me some time to really process through that. How does this actually, work? And then, and I was going to ask you, like the pain that you've experienced, like how, like, it seems like that has birthed in you creative energy.
Mm. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think that it's more like, I think it's more that it gives you more to say, and more important things to say, and it has this kind of clarifying, crystallizing effect where you're like, what's really important now, Um, when I look back in my 20s, the things I was railing against, some of them were not important. I was just getting petty. But now I'm a lot more clear because I've gone through that kind of refining. I mean, I think it's Richard Rohr talks about, times of great transformation in our lives are either great love or great pain. And I've certainly experienced that. Like, I don't regret, they weren't fun and they were painful, and pain is not fun. But I don't regret those painful episodes that have given me more to say and have clarified what I'm actually here to say. I think, that's really helpful. And yeah, then it just becomes deciding what the medium to say that best is, like, is it, and that's where the creativity comes in. Is it standing up and giving talks? Is it making a video? Is it taking images, or is it doing writing? Like, what is it? What's the best way to communicate this thing that after that episode, what's it taught you about God, life, spirituality, and how things work and what's important? What's it given you to say? And then how can you put it out there and say it? I mean, it's kind of like the prophets, isn't it? A lot of them went through difficult, dark things that they had to come out of and then begin to speak. It's I think that's the way it works. Jesus has to go to the desert for 40 days to actually have something to like come and give from his ministry. There are these things we go through that, and it's always worth remembering when you actually go through those. I think it's too much to say that, oh, you might be going through this dark time for a reason, but I do think it's enough to say that maybe this can be used for something good on the other end of it if we stay present to it and stay present to that pain. We don't try and numb it out or just avoid it or drive it away or shove it down, that we actually stay present to it as bravely as we can and see what it has to teach us and show us about life and about ourselves, so that when we come out of it, every great spiritual teacher we know, every great world leader we know has been through something really dark and has been given something good to say on the other end of it. So I think it's more like that. Creativity comes after. That's almost the mode of delivering whatever you have to deliver afterwards.
Mm. As you were in ministry and have transitioned, I was really curious. What do you how have you seen the connection between creativity and ministry, and then photography? Has it has looking back at the scriptures through certain lenses helped you? And not only that, did you feel like you could be creative when you were in ministry?
Yeah, I mean, I think ministry was where I really kind of ramped up that creativity, and specifically, I think before ministry, creativity was something quite selfish just for me because I felt good doing it. Ministry taught me how to point creativity at something outside of me. So, for example, I was in most churches I worked for, I was also the music pastor, and I like worship leading was something is something still I really miss to this day. It's something I love doing, and I love that. It's funny because I think worship leaders are the only people who understand this aspect of music this well. It is using music for something more than yourself and trying to get out the way. Like it's kind of a unique experience. I think a lot of music is obviously designed to put the musician front and center and to then soak up that adulation. But I think, we were always encouraged that. I had a friend of mine who used to put it that if you're a good worship leader, it's you're somebody who God trusts with his presence. I thought it was a nice way to put it.
Ooh, that's
You know,
really
and
nice.
I thought
like
like,
that.
wow, so that's kind of stewarding something, right?
Yeah.
I'm in this place, I have this gift, and we're all on this stage here, but we've been given this thing to give to this group of people here. I don't have any power over it. I don't control it in any way, but we're just like a conduit in this moment, and it comes through creativity. So whereas you might have caught me 10 years before that playing around with music, it would have been because I would be going, how many claps can I get at the end of this song I just sang, and people are going to be impressed by it. And this sort of taught me to go like, no. At the end of this, can I walk away going, wow? And it would hit me like nothing hits me today. Like being able to look out and see people in the crowd or in the audience who are having that moment, like that real moment of connection, feeling like I was a tiny conduit to help that happen. Like I couldn't look at them because I'd be in floods of tears. I wouldn't be able to carry on. Like it was like taking creativity to a new level where it was about more than myself. And there's a quote that I used in the last book I wrote, which is from a pastor named Frederick Buechner. And he has this quote. This is something like, I always get the wording slightly wrong, but it's something like, the place God calls you to is the place where your deep joy and the world's deep hunger meet. So he's got this idea that like, if you can find what your deep joy is, think of that creatively, right? So in that case, music might have been my great joy. And that's fine. I could just use it for that, and it brings me joy, and I get a bit of attention from it. That's fine. But if you want the next level, you have to have the other half of that equation, which is, I've got that deep joy. I've worked out what it is for me, but now how can I point it at somewhere where the world's a bit hungry, a bit sad, a bit broken? And can I mend something a little bit there? You know, can I bring things back together? So like, and I've heard people sort of redefine the word religion like this as well. You know, this idea that actually there's a suggestion that it comes from, the word religion comes from ligare, the Latin ligare, which is where we get our word for ligament. So it's this joining idea, and religion, rejoining, religaring. So it's bringing things back together that might be broken. So how do we take the thing we love and fix something, religare something that's slightly broken in the world, and be used by God to do that? Now, that for me is where creativity hits that next level. So everywhere I've gone since then, whether it's doing photography, you know, I started out the same. I just went, let me make some images, see if I can get some attention and make some money from them. And that's great. But you always hit a point on that journey where you go like, yeah, but what does it mean? Right. I've got that, but what is it? I don't feel like anything I do has any meaning. That's the point where you go, okay, now I need to look at the other half of the equation again. And so I started to make videos around it, more creativity, started to write around it, because I went back to my first mission, which was the same as it was in the church, trying to help people get a handle on their lives, especially people who really struggle with anxiety. So I worked out, you know, my videos became less about, you know, photography tutorials and more, like you say, little sermons. I mean, my ex-wife used to tease me and say, the only reason you started a YouTube channel is so you can keep preaching. And I'm like,
That's
yeah,
right.
that's kind of, because that's in me. That's who I am. That's what I want to do. But it's not just creativity for creativity's sake. I'm always trying to work out, how do I point it back? How do I point it outwards and fix the world in a tiny way? You know, if you caught me back in those days in the church, I would have talked about bringing the kingdom. How do I bring the kingdom a little bit in anything I do creatively? Because I'll have all the meaning in the world in what I make if I can find that link, if I can find that connection.
Yeah, I don't have a musical gift in my body, but when it comes to preaching, you know, especially weekly, you know, there's a deliverable every Sunday.
Yeah.
Whether you're tired or hungry, or whether you're overloaded or heartbroken or you're happy, there's a deliverable. So there's this anticipation of creation that God's doing every single week for your understanding. What's J.I. Packer's quote, right? Preaching is truth through personality.
Oh, yeah.
And
Nice.
so it's this way, and it takes at least it took me a while to figure out that what's happening to me, it's not the sermon, but it's the filter through which the sermons are going to come from. So, of course, that one week you're preaching on trusting God and being content is going to be the week where your bank account's empty. You know what I mean? And seeing these connections that are there, but also in the craft of how to communicate to people and be not just, true, but true to yourself. It's this creative act that you're in, and you're relying on the Spirit, and you're looking at the text, and not only that, it takes into play all the creative things God has done in the Scriptures.
Yeah.
I mean, what a menu we have. I found, and it took me a while, and this is where photography came for me, is I'm a visual thinker. And that has made me a verbal processor. It's a weird thing because I have to understand the pictures that are in my head. And so for some reason, I've gravitated towards apocalyptic literature. I love Ezekiel and Zechariah and Daniel and Revelation because I get it. They're like theological cartoons, and you get to help people kind of piece it together. It's really fun. And even though people come up to you going, I have no idea what you were saying. It's like, that's cool because now we're in the company of the disciples, right? How many sermons do you think they walked away from Jesus and was like, got it, made sense? So I found the creative process, it went part and parcel with, the weekly grind of ministry. Never mind, being in a place to see, if we take 1 Corinthians 12, that everyone's got a place in the body and working together. And so, leaders of the church are like curators. You know what I mean? We're curating the masterpieces that are in front of us, bringing them together to, show His glory. And I just have found that so cool to be able to go, getting the right people in the room. I don't have to be the smartest, the wisest, and have all of the answers. And it's fun to sit together in mystery. And that's where the creative juices start to flow, I think, is when you're sitting there going, I don't know what this text is saying, but maybe there's a little block right here we can kind of like meditate on to kind of see where the Lord leads us in these things. So, if there's new songs that we're going to be singing in glory, it's because there's new mercies, because there's new pain and sin that's coming from us. So that kind of, I found it incredible how it's all woven together. And then for photography, just being able to like grab a camera, and what I learned in photography, I didn't realize this, Sean, is that, as a kid, you're doing point and shoot stuff. Like, there's actually a place to focus. All I could do is a composition, but I didn't have a story. And I find something so cool. It's like that Fan Ho thing, right? You find this beautiful light and shadow, and you're just kind of like, and you're waiting for someone to walk in, but you don't know who that is, and you don't have a connection to them, but you think it's amazing. And then you're like, see? And they're like, what? I don't know what that is, Yeah. And that's kind of why I got into portrait photography and weddings, because all of a sudden I got to focus in on somebody's story. And the lens choices have something to say in the way we communicate. And particularly in apocalyptic literature, I'm curious your thoughts. What do you think about the Lord using a telephoto lens to help us see? So the backgrounds are compressed and everything melts together and we can't understand it. You know what I mean? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think like I hear what you're saying. I don't know how any of that works, honestly. But I like the idea that the best work we're going to make comes out of who we are. And I hear you saying that it's not just about the sermons you preach. Like it's about the fact that it comes through you and what happened in that week. Like everything gets filtered through our story. I mean, we used to say in seminary,
Yeah.
in our kind of homiletics classes that, we preach best what we need to hear most. And so like the best stuff I have to say is the stuff that comes through the things that I've lived and probably the thing that I'm struggling with right now most keenly. So and I think that works for photography too. We think like it's just about going out and making a nice composition or, taking an image, but it's far more about, once you've got over all that technical stuff, because you can learn the technical part of photography in 2 weeks. That's not a problem. It's pretty quick. But like working out what you should be pointing your camera at and what you're going to say with it, that's a lifetime. And like, I bet you that the way you shoot a wedding is different from maybe how your friend shoots weddings, who also does the same thing, because of your story and what you notice and what you pick up in the room that she doesn't pick up in the room, or, we're so, and I think that's one of the gifts of creativity, and what makes it really special is we're allowed to put our stamp on it. We should. It shouldn't be just like, anonymous or hanging floating in the air. It should be like this human being, with all this crap that I've gone through and all this story that's really messy, all the mistakes I've made that thing, and all that stuff that came before shaped it, gave it a flavor. So it's a perspective. So it's like, it has something to say. I think it's like, I think that's how it does work and should work. And I mean, I remember like preaching for me was incredibly creative, how you say something, not just the writing part is half of it, right? But then how you deliver that in the moment and how you adjust to an audience that's adjusting to you and what you feel is going on in the room, all of that is super creative. Like it has to come through me and from me. And some nights it will go well, and some nights I make mistakes, and that's a given. That'll always happen. But that's the same as photography. Like,
Yes.
and it comes down like what lenses I choose. Like I teach photographers and talk about, everyone goes, well, what lens should I be using? Should I be using a 35 mil or an 85 mil on the streets? I'm like, there's no answer to that. How do you see the world? Do you see the world in 85 mil, or do you see it in 35 mil? The answer has to come out of you. I can't tell you what the right answer is, because I know brilliant 35 mil street photographers and brilliant 85 mil street photographers. It doesn't matter what you choose, but the point is you have to dig in you and work out what better serves you as a tool to communicate the things you want to say, or how do you want to show us the things that the rest of us are missing in the world that you notice. What lens is going to help you do that? That's where it has to come from. Like it's your personality outwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also, man, in your book, you talk about the active creating is a way of making order out of chaos. So, as soon as I read that, I'm like, oh, Sean's picking right out through Genesis. And and then with Logos, you're picking up on, John 1 and stuff. So it's fun to see how even the language of Scripture and the categories there have helped you think through and process the creative journey. What were some things that led for you to make those connections? What influenced you to think about order out of chaos?
I mean, it was already in me, I guess. Like, I suppose, like that's the story I've been trained in. That's my worldview, for better or worse. That's my worldview. That's what I believe about the world. And it's funny with the order and chaos thing in particular. Like, I mean, the basic idea in the book, as I talk about, I kind of hypothesize, for me anyway, certainly, that creativity is creating order out of chaos. So it's this idea that entropy exists, that over time things break down and move into greater states of disorder over time. And every time we make something, we're wrestling little things back from that entropy and we're making order again, which is what God ultimately did and does all the time, right? So we get to co-create. We get to make tiny bits of order out of chaos, just like God does in the big picture, right? Which I think is us in his image as human beings. Yes. I think it's a beautiful idea, right? But you'd be amazed how lots of creative people push back with that, and they really argue with it. They're like, no, creativity is chaos. Creativity is definitely chaos, because I think chaos to them feels more freewheeling, and freewheeling feels more creative, or something like that. I think that it's more of a feeling around it. And they say, yeah, but what about like really dark art or stuff that's, just showing chaos and it just looks like chaos on the canvas? I'm like, yeah, but chaos exists. So when we personify it or we represent it in a piece of art, surely by describing it, we're creating order out of it. Describing chaos is still creating order, right? We're saying this is the chaos that we all experience. And in this act of safety in numbers, we kind of nod our heads to each other and go, yeah, sometimes it's tough. That's creating order. That's not creating chaos. It's describing chaos, but it's still ultimately creating order. So I think, when we, use rules of compositions in photography to kind of place elements in a frame, that's creating order out of chaos. When we put the right ingredients when we bake, because that's the way it works, and put it in the oven at the right temperature, it's creating order out of chaos, right? When we use complementary colors on a canvas in paint, like we're using the rules of things, and we're working out how to frame things and how to place things on a canvas to say we're making order out of things that were just lying around. Like a pot of paint isn't creative on its own. We're adding to it and making order out of it. So I think that's what creativity is. We're all feeling quite like, I suppose, and this goes probably back to the dawn of human history. We feel out of control because we don't have control of our circumstances. Famine comes, drought comes, sickness comes. We don't have control, right? So we're trying to create little bits of order together. Go, we're okay, right? We're okay. Even as we're staring in the void together, we're okay, right? We're in this together, right? And I think that's kind of beautiful. Even though, and I say in the book, we're not going to win this. Like, we don't win the battle by doing this. But, ultimately, chaos does win out. That's the end of the story. We know it. But I think there's something beautifully human about still doing it anyway, and holding hands with each other and doing that anyway. And that co-creator idea of joining God and doing that, I love that idea. And then the Logos stuff, yeah, I mean, it's straight out of seminary. It's straight out this idea that God makes with a word. He speaks creation into being, and that speaking is truth. It's capital T truth, right? It's always capital T truth because of the source. And this idea that if you want to co-create in that way, the things you make have to be capital T true. And that means that we are describing what we authentically intuit about life, the universe, and everything. We're putting it down as honestly as we can in the things that we make, in the ways that we can dig the deepest and put that stuff out there. I think we then get to also participate in Logos, this idea of speaking truth with the things that we make in the ways that we co-create. And there's no surprise. That's straight out of my faith, right? That's where that comes from. That's why I believe that stuff.
Love it. You had a quote that I just really resonated with. You said, and this is not from your book, I don't think. I think this is from one of your videos. I think this may have been when you went back to South Africa to do portraits of your mentors, I think. But you said, for me, photography is more than just a technical exercise. For me, it is also a spiritual practice. I find that if my life is getting on top for me, it is still my habit to go pick up a camera and take a long walk. I know that walking around and being present in the space that I am in and being visually aware of the stuff that is going on around me, recognizing good light and capturing it, has a way of allowing the part of my mind that loves to worry to disconnect and process things a bit better. And just walking around, I find that it brings perspective, even if I am not specifically thinking of the things that I am worrying about. I swear you're reading my mind. It's exactly how photography has worked for me in so many ways. It's not always the case, because obviously we go with different intentions, when we pick up a camera sometimes. But I'm right there, man. Oftentimes, I remember it was probably 2022, early 2022. I was going through a lot of stress and anxiety, and I just had to go to downtown Boston and do street photography. It was just the way, and I was processing life as I was going through, and just sometimes I was hunting and I was fishing as I went. Sometimes as you walk, you're hunting, and as you sit in a spot with the nice thing, then you're fishing. And I find myself doing that all throughout the city. Had an incredible day, and I still look back at those images, going, man, like. I could feel myself there in those images, even though I never documented how I felt. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's about presence, right? It's why, and this is one of the gifts the church gave me as well, is to teach me how to have a quiet time, like a little sit every day. Like it became a practice for me from 13, and I wouldn't miss them. Every day I would sit down and I would have some time to pray, journal, and read scripture. That was what I'd do every day. And when I left the church, that changed. I didn't do that because I had mixed feelings about it. It brought up bad stuff for me. So for a while, I had to fill it with something, and it started to get filled with a walk. And then it kind of brought me to this idea of pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is taking a super long walk and trying to be present to life again and work out what's going on and sift. So they're kind of like mini daily pilgrimages. Like, I would, especially when I left my day job and started working for myself, I didn't have a commute at the beginning and end of the day because I'd work at home. So I gave myself a commute. I go for an hour-long walk at the beginning of the day. That's my commute now. While everyone else is on the bus and on the tube, I go for a walk around the park, and it's so centering. And if I do that with a camera, it visually makes me aware of the things I'm missing. How often are we just walking around and we're kind of in this zone of, we're obsessing over the same worries. It's like this cycle, this treadmill that runs in our head. We're not even really seeing what's around us. We're just walking, and we're hyper focusing on things we can't control, and that obviously creates anxiety, right? But walking is a good start. It kind of gets you out the house, and then the other, like picking up the camera, clicks out of my conscious and into my subconscious brain, puts me in a different headspace, and starts me looking around going, hang on a minute, I'm forcing myself to notice what I'm walking around. So if I'm obsessing about the same stuff, making myself anxious, I'm not noticing things. But if I'm looking at the fact that it's quite misty this morning and the light is coming through these trees in a way, and it's just hitting this bench in the park, and there's an old lady sitting there, and I'm like, what a beautiful scene. I wouldn't have seen that if I was in that headspace. If my life is just terrible, I can't control everything, I'm not going to see it. But with a camera in my hand, I'm like, wow, look at that. And I picking the camera up, I'm working out what exposure needs to be. I'm trying to get a good shot out of it. And I'm paying attention to what's happening outside of me. That's a spiritual experience. That's being brought back out of my own self-obsessed, narcissistic headspace, where my life is just terrible and everyone else is getting by just fine, to, oh gosh, we're all struggling a little bit. And the world's actually quite a beautiful place. And there's gratitude there suddenly. And then when I put that camera away and I carry on walking, I'm like, what was I even thinking about? What was I so obsessed about? And then I go like, oh, it was that thing. Oh gosh, well, I was making a big deal of that. I'll get back to it later. It's not as big a deal as I was making it. We get spun up so fast. So yeah, walking with a camera in particular has become a way that I get out of that, that kind of self-obsessed treadmill of anxiety, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the only thing that stops me when I'm thinking about that is, what will people think of me because I've got a camera in my hand? That's the only thing that stops me, is like, especially if I'm walking in my neighborhood, you know what I mean? But thankfully neighbors, they see enough times, 1,000 times, that they're not worried if you have a camera in your hand. But yeah, I could not resonate more, Sean. It's been, you back when your wife had left you, and one of the things that you did on your channel was you talked about the healing power of self-portraits.
Yeah.
That just ripped my heart out, made me cry, and I loved it so much. And my wife and I, we've gone through infertility in our lives. We had 3 miscarriages, and I think after the second miscarriage, me and my wife, we just kind of heard the news. We're sitting at our kitchen counter. I just happened to have my camera right there.
Mm.
And there was, I don't know what happened, Sean. She was just sitting there. This light was just coming right through the door, hitting her just right. And I just had to just go click, click, click. And I said, honey, can you look at me? Click. And those images that I took are just this, there's this healing power of, and that wasn't a self-portrait. That was a portrait of my wife when we were going through grief. What led you to do portraits and self-portraits, and how do you do that when you literally can't even see because your eyes are watering because you're so sad?
I mean, it's two things really. The one is the initial thing came from, and this is before my wife had left. I was in a hotel room, and I had this experience where I was sitting on the bed, and I looked up, there was kind of a full length mirror against the wall, and I looked up at the mirror, and I thought, whoa, there's someone else in my room, because I saw my reflection and didn't. There's like that split second sometimes where you see your reflection, but you don't immediately recognize yourself. There's a split second disconnect, and I saw a skinny teenager lying on my hotel room bed. I'm like, who the hell's that guy? And then oh no, it's me. And I had this odd like moment where I was like, wow, I see myself, and it kind of brought back all this. Being teased at high school. I was always the skinny kid at high school. I was always like, everyone else was doing gym and taking creatine and getting big for rugby season. And I was a skinny kid. And I think it just made me realize, like, I don't see myself right. I see myself through the filter of what other people have told me I am and how I feel bad about myself because I'm this, skinny boy looking adult. And so in the moment, I thought I need to do something about it. And I put a chair against a wall in the hotel room, and there was some lovely light coming in through the window, and there was this sort of it's kind of this sheer material, and it was sort of creating waves in the light as well. So I kind of sat in the light there, and I took a very vulnerable self-portrait. Now I'm wearing underwear, but you can't really see because of the armrest. But otherwise, it's just me. Like, and I propped my little Ricoh GR3 little point and shoot camera on the table on a timer. I just took a shot. And it took me a while to look at it, and I went back to it a few weeks later, and I kind of edited it black and white, and I just very basic, and I showed it to a friend, and I'm like, I just took this photo in a hotel room. I think I've got body issues. Like I feel embarrassed to say, but I think I've got body issues about myself, and I just took this photo. He's like, but this image looks great. What are you saying? I don't know what you're. Huh. And it took me a lot of courage, but I think to get over this for myself, I need to post it. I need to put it online somewhere. So I put it on Instagram with a bit of a story underneath about what had actually happened. And the response I got to that image was mad. Like it's still to date the most comments and interactions on an image that I've ever posted, with people saying, oh my gosh, me too. I also struggle with this. Wow. And great image. And it made me realize, like, wow, because I suddenly saw what they saw in the image, not what I saw, because I see myself in the way I've been told to see myself, or teased to see myself as I was a kid, and there was a lot more self-acceptance that came around. So, in 2021, when my wife left, and she it all happened super suddenly, but she just one day left, went to work, and sent a text saying, I'm never coming home. I don't want to talk about it. And I don't want to talk to you again. So it was like literally blindsided like that. And so for a good 2 months, I was just man down. Like, what do you do with that? It changes everything. And I kind of remember back to that story, and it was a bigger issue now. This wasn't a body image issue. This is like, who am I now? Who am I in all of this? Like, what am I in the world? What am I supposed to do next? Like, I'd lost a bit of my identity, because some of my identity was caught up in that. So I said, I need to pick up the camera again. And I started to point the camera at myself and take a bunch of photographs, trying to work out from the outside, who are you? What are you doing now? What's your next move? What have you got to offer now? How are you going to rebuild yourself? All these questions that came through. And I deliberately was taking photographs of things about myself that I didn't like, trying to see them in a different angle. And so I made this video for sharing a bit. I'd shared a bit about what had happened a couple of months before that, but but then sharing these images and how healing it was, and sort of getting to terms with who I was again, and how healing I found that process. And I don't like every image, and I certainly didn't share every image at all. Like, I was still selective, but definitely in the process, I saw more honestly who I was, and I liked myself more honestly, and it gave me a bit more courage to pick myself up and carry on with a bit more direction. And that was another video where the comments underneath, if you read them, are just people going, "Wow, I tried this for myself, and it's been hugely helpful." It's in the video I talk about the fact that we conspire with mirrors. We all stand there and we look at ourselves from that one angle that we think we look good, but everyone else sees.
And it's the opposite too of what we actually see, so it's even distorted when we look at it. Yeah,
exactly. And we also, I never see the side of my head. I don't like it, but other people do. And I'm like, do you know what? Like, everyone else sees you and loves you for who you are 360 degrees because they see it all. And that one angle you look at the mirror because you think you look good like that, you conspire with the mirror to give you that. That's exactly what I look like. Don't change it. Like, take images from every angle, work out what everyone else sees and what everyone else loves about you. And if you can love that, you're going to be a more secure, more whole human being, I think. That's a beautiful story about you and your wife, though. I mean, I think like photographing each other in a dark time like that, that's a powerful thing to do. And I think I would imagine that you see the beauty and the pain in all that, in that image. And that's like what a powerful thing to have between the two of you. That's brilliant.
Well, it's weird because you're just like, it's like bringing a camera to a funeral, you're like, is this something that you want to document? But yeah. I just felt led. And there's, it was my way of staying present with her to see what I'm seeing right in front of me. Because my mind is racing, right? You just like, oh, that's our second miscarriage, and we're on this train again. And I remember, man, I saw this devastating documentary on HBO. I forget the name of it, Sean. You probably have seen it. It's this woman photographer who had taken her life, but her sister went back through all of her photos, and it's just, you could see the pain kind of coming together in all these things. She was so creative and so thoughtful, but for her sister to have to kind of like do the cleanup work afterwards. And so it always makes me feel weird to be in grief spots, so treading lightly. But one of the things that my wife and I have done is, as she's picked up a camera and learned, she's a different kind of photographer, but she just trusts me. And but the one thing that really has struck me about you, Sean, is your ability to be vulnerable to your viewers, to your listeners and readers, particularly online. And you've gone through a lot. It seems like very significant stuff. Losing your father at a young age. You were teased for your appearance. You were ostracized from your community and faith, right? Leaving the church. And obviously your wife leaving you. So I just want to say thank you for your vulnerability. It's, to put yourself out there with the peanut galleries of comments that come at you is, dude, the armor that you have is somewhere. Is it under your shirt? I don't know if you got a bulletproof vest, but, or if you're Neo and you can just, get out of the way. But how has it been possible for you to be so open about your pain?
I think part of it, I don't want to take too much credit, because I think there is a part of my personality that doesn't struggle as much as some people do with that. I've never been a very private person. I've always told anyone anything they want to hear. Like, and if someone wants to go have a deep conversation, like, I'll tell you anything because I love the deep conversations, So I think it does come a bit easier to me than some, but I'm also aware that, and I think I learned this in the church preaching as well. I mean, often, like, you'll know this as a preacher, like you've got some piece of scripture, you've chosen a passage for that week, and you want to get this message across, And so you'll do a bit of, historical exposition. This is where it was written. This is what was going on. You'll read the passage. You'll explain what was going on, and that's all well and good, right? But it doesn't hit until you tell a story, right? Until you ground it in like well, this is what happened to me, and this is why this makes a difference in my life, and why I think it can make a difference in yours. And I really learned this idea that if I'm going to ground an idea that I have that I think could help people, then I need to use my life to do it, and my personal story to do it. And I need to push myself to do that as vulnerably as possible. I don't want to just be an open wound, because that just could come across as like, feel sorry for me, or, take pity on me or something like that. I have to have done a bit of healing about it so that it's not that raw open wound. And I have to understand it so that I'm not talking about something that someone can see, wow, he's still got a huge blind spot on that one. He doesn't understand it at all. I have to understand, I have to see it. But once I've done that, it then can be a tool to talk about something that's actually helped me to get over something difficult in my life. So it's kind of a calculated technique, if I'm honest, that I think it's a good communication tool. It's a good way to get things across. And if I'm able to find what other people will perceive as the courage to talk about something that's difficult to talk about, it hopefully also gives them, or helps them find the courage to talk about the things they struggle with too. It kind of models the fact that I really do believe that vulnerability with one another is what binds us back together. In our Western world especially, that is more and more individualized, where we're hiding behind closed doors, we're not talking to each other about our difficulties. That is the way to healthier societies and people in general. So I think modeling that is part of what I had to offer as well. And I'm still choose, I'm not just like, here's all my junk. I'm still choosing what to share, but I'm always trying to push myself to share slightly more than I'm comfortable with. Because if I want to stay comfortable, I just won't share anything. I just won't tell anyone anything. But I can see and have seen the good that can be done if I push it a bit. So it's a hard line to ride. But I'm sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. But I definitely believe in the process. Yeah.
And how have you responded to, or what kind of like reception? I'm sure you're getting a lot of people who can empathize and go, "Wow, thank you for sharing that," and that's so powerful. But woven in that, right? And we always get drawn to the negative stuff. How were you able to silence the voices that you don't want to hear? And sometimes there are voices you should hear, but especially when it comes to internet comments to art that you're putting out there.
Yeah, I mean, I went on a bit of a journey with this one. I think for a while I did it wrong because I'm fairly articulate, so I can get a point across. And so when people started to come across to the things that I was doing, especially towards the beginning when everything I was doing started to get a bit of attention, which is usually when the trolls come around, by the way. Because they're like, oh, this is getting attention. I don't think it should. I think people should give me attention.
Yep.
So
let's tear it down.
Myself into this space. I think I use the fact that I was, reasonably articulate to argue back with people, because I thought like, well, you're going to come in here and start a fight. I'm going to finish it. Right. And so, I was never rude. I was certainly never more rude than they were being to me. I always wrote a little line with it. But I would push back and I would argue back. And of course, because I had an audience, they'd pile on and start shaming people and they'd disappear, right? And then one day I realized, like, after a particular conversation with somebody, I just had this feeling like, am I being an intellectual bully here? Like they started it, right? So why should I care? But actually I thought, who am I talking to? I don't really know who this person is. This could be a 14-year-old in an abusive family, in his parents' basement, trying to start creativity, but like, picking up a camera, but not really getting anywhere. And he's angry and frustrated that he can't make this thing work. And he just doesn't know where to put his emotions right now. And so, or he's dealing with mental illness. And so he's jumping on my things and going, you're rubbish and whatever, because he just doesn't know how to express himself. He doesn't know how to say, I'm upset because I'm really trying this. It's not working. He doesn't have that emotional intelligence. And now I'm pushing back him and arguing, and everyone else is piling on him. I'm not a good human being at that point. And so it really made me realize, like, I need to be very, very careful about the position I have, and just because someone comes at me aggressively, I don't know who they are. I have no idea if they know what they're talking about. I'm pretty sure they don't care about me. So why am I engaging them as if this is an intellectual debate, right? Why am I doing that? It's not helpful. And so now I'm very liberal with the use of the kind of hide user from channel or restrict user on Instagram buttons, because I realize like somebody like that is just desperate for oxygen around what they're saying, because they need some kind of attention, even if it's negative attention.
No one will listen to me. Maybe
Exactly.
they'll listen to me because I'm saying something controversial on a popular person's page.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing to do is to use those features. So both YouTube and Instagram have buttons where you can hit them, and that comment doesn't get removed. It sits there. I can see it, but nobody else can see it. So the person who posted it can still see it sitting there. I can see it. So if they care about the fact that I need to read it, then I've read it. I'm not responding to it, but I have seen it and I've read it. But nobody else can see it. So you're not going to get the oxygen and the argument that you want out of that. And I think I'm doing you a favor there, because the negative attention you're trying to get for that is not going to help you in the long run. And hopefully with trying to put that vitriol out there and it just hanging in space and not getting anything back, hopefully that makes you think about what you've said. And I've often had, when I use this kind of feature with people, I often get a message like 2-3 months later, like direct message from the same person going, I just had one this week, saying, by the way, that thing I said, I'm really sorry. I was in a bad place. I don't know why I did it. This is what happened. I mean, this guy this week was like, my dad had just died. I had all this pent up aggression. I didn't mean to say it like that. I'm really sorry. And then we were able to have a conversation and go, I'm really sorry to hear that, man. I take no offense. I hope you're doing better. And suddenly, you realize, like, what are you saying? If you push back or get angry back at that person on that day, who are you really talking to, and what are they going through? Because it's not good. Whatever it is, it's not good, right? And by pushing back aggressively, like, are you well, you started it, for me, is no longer good enough. Like it's I need to take even more responsibility than that and just go, I'm just going to hide that, because I think this person is going through something, and I don't want to argue with them, and I don't want to expose them to my audience having a go at them, right? Just let it sit, and hopefully they find a better place for themselves.
Wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, my social media got hacked and shut down back in 2023, so I haven't been on social media for years, and
Lucky
so yeah, I know, and they did nothing to help me get my account or information back. So I just said, you know what, I now have 2 little boys, so I've got more than enough attention that I need to give
Good for you.
to. But Sean, what are some projects that you got going on, and what is the future like for you?
I'm working on a new book with a friend of mine. It's kind of early days, but it's sort of completely different. This is kind of more photography focused, so that's kind of taking up some time at the moment. I do, I'm keeping going with the YouTube channel. I just put out 1 video a month, but that's kind of regularly ticks over.
That's a great rhythm. I love that.
Yeah.
It gives you space, lets it breathe.
Exactly. I mean, I'm never going to be this and I never was going to be this 1 a week, 2 a week kind of person. I don't have enough to say, honestly. I want everything I make to be worth your time. So I'd rather percolate and write something that's worth it,
Yeah.
And I do these magazines twice a year now called Parable, where it's basically like, I mean, from the church, we obviously know like a parable is like a story told as a spiritual or moral analogy about something bigger. So it's, I use that idea in these magazines, and I'll start the magazine talking about some kind of photography concept. So the first one was on window light, right? The next one was about my trip to Namibia, taking portraits with the Himba tribe. And then the third one was about taking portraits and taking images of the architecture in churches and the light that falls in churches in different cities around Europe when I travel. And so each one starts with a photography theme, and I'll talk about photographing and why I photograph that, why I find it interesting. But then by the end, I'm talking about something more moral or spiritual. So in that window light one, I'm talking about the fact that, windows obviously let light into dark interiors in our homes. A camera it has an aperture in the lens. Aperture is a synonym for window. It floods light into a dark interior onto a sensor. Like, so how can we be more deliberate about flooding light back into our dark interiors when we're battling or struggling, and talking about that. So the Namibia story was talking about how, approaching a tribe outside my culture, and how do I do that sensitively, not just the photography side of it. The one about the church light and, photographing in churches around Europe ends up me talking about my spiritual journey with the church and where I am now. And, so each one sort of is that parable. It's sort of starting with a photography principle and something that's sort of simple for the photography guys, and moving through to the moral, spiritual side. I think about 20% of my audience get to the end of the magazines, but like, it's for that core audience who kind of really care about that stuff, and they kind of make me happy to make. So it's photography and writing around a theme. And then I'm trying to work on a few photography projects for myself as well. It's been a real struggle, but slowly getting there bit by bit. The idea is hopefully to put out, proper monograph books of photography over the years. I'm a little way away, but it's kind of the next big challenge for me. Yeah.
I love what you've got going on there. That's it makes me wonder, in the flood of especially theological and books in the Christian faith, there's very few that have pictures.
Yeah, true.
And I was wondering, have you thought about maybe if you're going to write anything, with your reflections or things that you want to share from your faith, that maybe there would be a kind of taking your Parable magazine and making it like a book form that actually is a bit more theologically direct or something. What do you think about that?
I'm gonna have to give you credit when it comes up now, because it's a good idea. It's a great idea. Yeah, it's a great idea. It's something I've toyed with. Yeah, I mean, you read Unlearning, and very few people have. Like, it's a book I self-published in South Africa, so it didn't go very far. But I have thought about. It was funny when I brought that up. I mean, it obviously comes from this idea of learning, unlearning, relearning. This kind of cycle that a lot of these things go through. And I remember my friend Roger said to me when it came out, he's like, "Yeah, okay. You've written this now. You've had your vent. Good. That's unlearning." He's like, "If you don't write relearning in 10 years, I'm going to be upset." And it's like, he's got a point, right? He's got a point. Like, it can't just be, that was the critique, and fair enough. That's where I was at the time. It now needs to be like, at some point I need to write that relearning, and I need to write that, like, what is it now then? You can't just say what it isn't. You have to say what it is. And so, yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to combine images with that. That'd be really cool.
Well, one of the entry points of me understanding your pastoral journey was when, in your video, when you went down back to South Africa and did your portraits of your mentors. Yes. And after seeing that video, and then every video you did after that, they kind of were behind you. Yeah. And that always struck with me, because I've got my own, cadre of, mentors, our personal board of directors, as it were. And that really made me think. I haven't brought the idea to them, but because some people are not so keen on that. But what a beautiful way to remember the people that you love and the people that you think about, not in a standing over me. Yeah. But I look up to them. Yeah. Kind of a sense. So
for me, it's like, I feel like who I am, at least in part, is because of them at very key points in my life. So the fact that they're behind me when I do that, it's nice. I mean, I don't talk about it a lot, but it's a nice thing for me, like a visual reminder for me that says, I'm here because of these guys. I'm not here because I came up with brilliant ideas. Like, I'm ripping everything they told me. It's getting filtered through who I am, and I'm giving it to you. But like, I owe these guys. They're the ones whose shoulders I'm standing on to do this.
Great stuff. Well, Sean, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I am so thrilled to be able to have talked to you in person, and I feel like I've seen your face and I've gotten to hear your voice. And not only that, there's a Sean Tucker gear sometimes my brain gets into that calms me down, gets me into certain zones. Some of your videos have been so helpful on headshots and corporate stuff, and as well as the philosophy. There's very few people talking about the philosophy of photography and creativity. And I think your voice is, and the influence there has a lot to do in the future.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It's been a lovely chat. Thank you.
Well, look at that. You made it to the end of the video. Thank you. ChristianBook.com has been a trusted resource for the church for nearly 50 years. Starting from a book table at a church on Sunday mornings, we now sell over 500,000 Christian-focused products all over the world. Each order ships quickly and is supported by a dedicated customer service team. You can request catalogs and newsletters specific to your interest, and you can even speak to a product specialist to help you find the exact thing you need and save you time in the process. Also, if you live in the greater Boston area, you can pick up your order in person. How about that? Once again, thanks for watching.